All right. Thank you, everybody. Now we've reached the opening statements with innovative solutions. And for that, I'm going to introduce Bishop Dr. Paul Murray. He and Simran Singh Stootnagel are going to moderate and run this session where all the opening statements occur. Dr. Paul Murray serves as Vice President of Religious Freedom Initiatives with the Global Peace Foundation. As a powerful advocate for religious freedom and human rights, we value his leadership also as Vice Chairman of IRF Secretariat. As Dr. Murray operates within this religious freedom space, he's the one who successfully set up and launched the Religious Freedom Roundtable in South Korea, which has participation with highest level North Korean defectors. He built remarkable partnerships with government and faith communities at the head of state and head of faith meetings all around the world. So please welcome Dr. Paul Murray.
Good afternoon. You all need to give yourselves a hand right now. Being here all this time, no break. As we open up today, let me share, as religious freedom continues to decline around the world, with nearly every community of faith facing varying degrees of persecution, actors within the civil society community are well positioned to provide insight and creativity in reversing the negative trends. The innovative solutions put forth through this Civil Society Congress is intended to provide governments across the world with practical action items to advance religious freedom from within their own content. Actors from across a multitude of regional fields that face an array of challenges to religious freedom are the first time in history of the international religious freedom movement providing solutions from an exceptionally diverse religious perspective. One thread unites all submitters of these innovative solutions, and that is the common desire to have their faith communities enjoy the fundamental human rights of religious freedom. This fundamental human right is at the core of what makes societies stronger amongst the people of the world. From societal factors to economics, political, and institutional factors, nations with a high degree of religious freedom produce stronger societies. The perspective that is offered by these partners, advocates, and allies in the fight to expand religious freedom is critical to shaping sustainable change in the various challenges facing communities of faith. Civil society leaders often provide a level of practical and intimacy that can be missed by policymakers. The mission of this Civil Society Congress is to empower policymakers and national leaders to pursue meaningful progress in charting the course towards developing a stronger bond of mankind through multi-faith harmony. From the sub-Saharan region to South Asia, from the Middle East to Latin America, and the broader scope of the West, religious freedom is under threat. We, this community here and all across the world, of like-minded and multi-faith organizations are seeking to combat that threat and empower national and international leaders with innovative solutions to expanding religious freedom. So I think you all should just give yourselves another hand, because it's because of all the work that you're doing that's going to make us successful. So congratulations to each and every one of you. I would like to now introduce Simran Stootnagel. He is one of the vice chairs of the IRF Secretariat, and among related engagements, the chairman of Sikh Forb, the chair of the Ozane Foundation's U.S. Trust, treasurer of the Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund, a senior fellow at the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute, and advisor to AMWEC, and more. Previously, Simran was the head of corporate strategy for the largest privately held security contractor to the U.S. government, with 3,000 armed employees just a few miles of where we are today, and activities in over 120 countries. Because of his work in Ukraine's active war zone, he recently received a commendation for extreme bravery from the deputy commander of the British Field Army. Would you welcome Simran?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you, Paul. I'm so happy we're kicking off the Civil Society Congress. Many friendly faces, obviously, some new ones. And as we know, despite over 20 years of increasing civil society and government actions to secure religious freedom for everyone, persecution globally has never been worse. So something needs to give, and the Earth Secretariat is proposing and implementing a new approach centered on cooperative engagement, even across some of our deepest differences. This approach will include strategic planning, alignment, and coordination of actions across bottom-up networks of civil society and top-down networks of government. This is happening in a number of countries now, and many are going to get added over the coming years. And you'll hear much more about this at the Earth Secretariat Partner Dinner tomorrow night. And with that, let's kick off the Congress. I'd like to hand it back to Paul to talk about his work with the Global Peace Foundation.
Thank you very much. The Global Peace Foundation, through its religious freedom initiatives, has championed and executed a range of multilateral initiatives that provide education, awareness, and advocacy in addressing international religious freedom. In Nigeria, the Inclusive Security Dialogue Initiative, conceptualized by the Global Peace Foundation, together with Vision Africa, works to mitigate rising insecurity by engaging prominent faith leaders with moral authority and key civic leaders to address critical issues. This initiative aims to build consensus and shared commitment to protect human rights and dignity, with freedom of conscience and religion at its forefront. The foundation of this approach is the understanding that our most essential identity, beyond differences of religion, ethnicity, or other social identities, is our common humanity. The Inclusive Security Dialogue was launched in October of 2021 as diverse high-level religious and civic leaders participated in an intimate retreat for open and honest dialogue held in the U.S. that resulted in a formal declaration outlining participants' commitment to peace and prosperity through continued collaboration. This momentum has continued to build through subsequent meetings in Abuja in 2022, expanding the base of leaders from key constituencies at the dialogue table. Given that such openness and enthusiasm can quickly dissipate with rising tensions around elections, it is critically important to maintain the momentum of this initiative during this potentially tumultuous 2023 election cycle. The active engagement of notable figures in this process helps anchor the potential for success. Key leaders, such as former President Osonga, the Sultan of Sokoto, and many others. Given the impact of the Inclusive Security Dialogue to date, the organizers are confident that this process will build cooperation, collaboration, and progress towards peace for Nigeria, contributing to a new path forward towards a Nigeria where people of all religious, social, and ethnic backgrounds can live safe, secure, and dignified lives with their religious convictions and protected. Thank you very much.
I've been asked to provide some comments from Sikh Forb and what is and isn't working from our perspective as we try to get our religion as involved as possible in religious freedom work. A quick second of background: Sikhs, we're the 5th largest religion in the world. We have about 30,000 gurdwaras or temples, and just in the last few weeks, there have been killings against, Sikhs killed in multiple countries, most recently Afghanistan and Pakistan. And in New York and Cherry Hill, there have been elderly Sikh men assaulted throughout this year that has that particular community, living in fear. So multiple Holocausts against the Sikhs. Twice it was announced that all Sikhs have been eradicated, which wasn't true. So, and Dr. Sweat said something interesting yesterday. She said that Abrahamic faiths are well-rooted because the belief there is that they received a direct message from God. Now, I know I'm simplifying, but to Sikhs, we think that's true, and we think our path to salvation is to protect your link with God, your direct link with God. That's how we advance. And it's what we're founded on, and it's what Sikh Forb is trying to advance. So here's a couple pointers from a decentralized religion, 30,000 temples, fairly large and a highly visible minority around the world. We have to study the issues. We're proud of our history, but when it comes to our engagement on religious freedom globally, we had to spend a lot of time understanding what other communities are going through. The Religious Freedom Roundtable and the Earth Secretariat have been working for Sikhs, and we weren't doing enough to work for others. So we had to get smart. And for your faith community, that would be our recommendation to you. Get smart on what others are going through. There's going to be people in as bad shape as you or worse. Then we thought we should recommend that each of us make a significant part of our messaging about others, more than half, maybe more than 70%. Don't talk about yourself all the time. Advocate for who's next to you. That's critical for this movement to progress. And then find significant parallels with other organizations and other communities around the world. For example, if I'm thinking, as Sikhs, we're proud that 400, 300 years ago, when Indian women from all the Indian religions were exported to various harems, we would raid the caravans and we would liberate the women. Well, today the Kurds are doing that with the city women, aren't they? So there's tremendous parallels. When we talk about a Holocaust, we look at what the Jews have gone through. When we talk about child bullying, which we look at what openly gay kids go through in U.S. schools, they are, along with kids with turbans, the most bullied in U.S. schools. Find the parallels, and then tell those stories to your communities about how what you're going through, others are going through as well. Then you need communication networks, so you need mailing lists, we have large Sikh websites. Get the message out, and build your network, get advisors from within your faith and without, and then show up for others all the time, and they will show up for you, and you won't be alone. So much from Sikh Forb. And with that, I would like to hand it to 21 Wilberforce.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with so many other passionate advocates today for freedom of religion or belief. My name is Trent Martin. I'm the Advocacy and Training Coordinator with 21 Wilberforce, and I'd like to share a little bit with you today about some data-driven solutions that we feel will help take our movement to the next level. So while sharing the stories of the heartbreaking persecution that we see around the world is vital to move our movement forward and to get the attention and passion of those advocates who need to stand for religious freedom, we need to also really undergird our base of support with an understanding of our movement's data in academic, in funding, and also in policy spheres through data-driven solution tools. 21 Wilberforce's IRF Congressional Scorecard and our Global Religious Freedom Data Spectrum are two ways that we've tried to start moving in that direction, and we are inviting and encouraging other collaboration in that area. These are both proven components of this network of decision support tools that we hope will continue to create a foundation of data for our movement's work. 6 years ago, 21 Wilberforce launched the IRF scorecard for Congress to track continuing efforts by members of Congress to counter affronts to international religious freedom, whether that's through caucuses or through legislation or commissions. The biannual scorecard is nonpartisan, and that's another vital thing that we need to make sure that we're continuing in our data, is to keep this work nonpartisan. And it serves as a multi-year record of legislative trends that we've seen in IRF. Really showing here where are some of the gaps in legislation that's happening. What issues aren't being addressed by Congress? What issues are receiving good attention that's actually made a difference? We need to make sure we're continually evaluating and monitoring our progress through tools like this. And also using tools like this to find the members of Congress that really are important to engage on these issues. As well, the Global Religious Freedom Data Spectrum Project is a project that has put together a comparative framework for viewing the data of over 13 NGOs and international governments that have put together different reports on international religious freedom. These country rankings on issues of freedom of religion or belief are placed side by side in this comparative framework, where people can look at the data and see, oh, well, this religion is really being persecuted heavily in this country, and then also, oh, we see that the Sikhs are also being persecuted here. We see the Muslims are also being persecuted, the Christians, and this can create a synthesis of really standing for all religions together, which is one of the main goals of this summit. We also really want to have this be used by advocates and academics and policymakers to really support the work that they're doing for international religious freedom, to show that there's not just one organization that's saying these facts, but it's backed up by a plethora of data that's out there, and really from multiple different perspectives. Because when we really stand together, we're much stronger as a movement. The interactive map as well really shows the data in a compelling way, because sometimes we need to make sure that we're presenting our message in a very clean and precise and winsome way as well. 21 Wilberforce will continue to develop these pieces to deepen this data support network, and we invite collaboration from academics, from all of you here as advocates, to make these tools more effective at driving tangible results for those who are facing persecution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trent. Appreciate it. And we don't want to be rude, but we've got to keep to the time score, so we're going to be cutting people if they go too far over. Next, I want to introduce Sean Nelson with ADF International. Sean?
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all, and it's fantastic to be here. My name's Sean Nelson. I'm legal counsel for global religious freedom at ADF International. ADF International is an international faith-based legal organization that works to protect fundamental freedoms for people worldwide. In response to the request, which was about innovative solutions, we decided to suggest a couple of solutions focused really on policy and legislative solutions of relatively straightforward items that could really immediately be implemented and have a positive impact on promoting international religious freedom. These solutions focus on strengthening the U.S.'s ability to hold serious violators of religious freedom accountable worldwide. So first, we would suggest passing the REVEAL Act, which is Senate Bill 2392. This would permit the State Department to make public the names of individuals who face targeted visa sanctions and visa bans related to human rights violations. Right now, if the State Department relies to a very large extent for targeted sanctions on civil society actors, but the State Department doesn't believe that it has the ability to release the names of people who have had their visas removed for these violations. So that makes it very difficult, if you're a member of civil society, to know, did this work? Did all of this effort, all of the resources we put into this have any real effect in the world? And so this act allows the State Department to make those names public so that we can know, yes, these things are having a real effect, or if no one is receiving targeted sanctions from a certain country, then it provides transparency so that we can make that known, make that public. So second, we would suggest passing regular congressional resolutions for countries recommended by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, for CPCs, from the Special Watch List, but not designated that way by the State Department. So these include, right now, countries like Nigeria or Vietnam, stating Congress's intent that these countries should be so designated. That's to make sure that when a watchdog body like USERF says, yeah, these places are really the worst religious freedom violators, we want that to be represented in real policy. I only have a few seconds, so I'll try to go quickly through the rest of these. We would suggest amending the IRF Act of 1998 to require regular reporting on the State Department's abilities, their attempts to have other countries enter into binding agreements and to make those agreements public. That's a policy tool that's been rarely used. It was earlier mentioned it was used with Vietnam. That hasn't been made public, so we don't know what the State Department is really doing about that. And last, we would suggest that USAID or another body or civil society organization should develop an IRF-related court case monitoring system around the world to fund widespread court monitoring of individuals who are accused of criminal charges that themselves are violations of religious freedom, things like false accusations or accusations based on blasphemy charges or such things. So those would be our suggestions. Thank you.
Wonderful, Sean. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite up Mahmoud Ahmed with the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mahmoud Ahmad. I'm here on behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA. In response to the request, the title of our submission is Non-Establishment Under God Toward a Non-Sectarian Principle for Muslim-Majority Countries. The constitutional model of Muslim countries presents itself as an Islamic republic with the enforcement of religious freedom as a principle. Nominally, Pakistan's constitution and those of other Muslim countries purport to guarantee freedom of conscience and religion. But what many of these constitutions give with one hand, they take away with the other. Most notably, Pakistan's constitution specifically deems members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community to be non-Muslim, depriving them of their essential professed identity as Muslims. This constitutionally enforced apostasy is amplified by legislation that criminalizes any manifestation of the Islamic faith by Ahmadi Muslims and denies fundamental rights of citizenship, including voting, to that community. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is willing to propose an alternative model for Muslim countries based upon the Medina Charter established by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. If implemented, the Medina Charter would enforce the freedom of religion as it was set forth by the founder of the Islamic religion. In this model, although the state would have the right to remain Muslim and would not necessarily have to relinquish its Muslim identity, it would have to recognize all the sects of Islam without distinction and/or interpretation, and recognize all other faiths without discrimination. This new constitutional model will operate on a non-sectarian basis, soundly rejecting the notion that any government should have the power to define the bounds of any faith. Accordingly, it will also allow everybody to vote and to have all the other rights enforced by the Constitution, irrespective of creed or sect. This is the ultimate model of freedom of conscience, as it would also allow any individual not to practice any faith. As the first step toward realizing this non-sectarian, non-establishment principle, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community calls upon the American Muslim diaspora, which holds a powerful and influential position in the Muslim Ummah, to sign a declaration unequivocally stating that no person or community ought to be declared non-Muslim or expelled from any other faith in any country. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I'd like to now call up the Alliance for Absolute Justice Women.
Good afternoon. My name is Rashida Ahmed, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Alliance for Absolute Justice Women. And today I would like to talk to you about the current state of affairs in EU nations regarding the hijab ban and the repression of Muslim women. And today I'm asking for a call to action. The current state of affairs in EU nations, Canadian Quebec province, and India is dismal and unsettling regarding the right of Muslim women to wear the hijab in public spaces. Modesty or purdah is a distinct feature of Islam, with women occupying a high status with protection. For Muslim women, the hijab is intrinsically connected to their faith, religious identity, and self-esteem. the impact of Muslim women having to weigh the importance of education, work, and involvement in the community against their right to freely practice their religion are far-reaching and regressive. Essentially, Muslim women face restricted opportunities for access, equity, and inclusion in various nations. The ban in Quebec and France are conclusive as to the existence of discriminatory practices when such rules are adopted by states. The current hijab bans also fuel the threats related to Islamophobia and gives rise to extreme violence. Given the current escalation of this issue, AAJ Women recommend the following. We recommend a joint resolution, a call to the UN Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief to end hijab bans all over the world. We request the undersigned UN Rapporteur on freedom of religion and belief to call for an immediate UN meeting regarding the bans adopted in different shapes and forms of legislation by countries and members of the European Union. Call for an immediate UN meeting regarding the bans adopted in different shapes and forms of legislation by the Quebec province in Canada. Call for an immediate UN meeting regarding the bans adopted in different shapes and forms of legislation by India. To cease and desist from all the legislation, decrees, laws, ordinances, or any legal act with the purpose of banning, restricting, shrinking, or otherwise extinguishing the rights of Muslim women to wear the attire of their choice. And AAJ Women, we actually have this resolution, and we are asking you to sign off on it today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to invite up Anila Ali, the founder and president of the American Muslim and Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anila, a Muslim Pakistani American woman, and all of these identities, they actually complement each other, just like religions should, I believe. God tells Muslims the seeking of knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. Yet in many countries, we're stopped from thinking altogether. Yet Allah says, I have created you into many tribes so that you may get to know each other. But in many Muslim countries, we are taught fear and hate of the other. Allah tells us in the Quran, if you believe, let not hatred of others make you swerve to wrong and depart from justice. Yet, many of us are taught to pass judgments and then deadly judgments against people whose religious beliefs may not be the same. I grew up in a Pakistan where I was educated by nuns who taught me Christian values of smiling, forgiveness, and respect. All of these values were based on Judeo-Christian values, but they were Islamic values. Sadly, South Asia is not the same anymore. Minorities are not free to practice their religion, and these values have eroded. Hate has poisoned the psyche of the next generation. However, I do believe, as an optimist, this damage is not irreparable. But it is time for all of us to act, to secure the freedoms for all those who practice and those who may not. Yes, men are still in control, but I say to the men, stand with women. Women have the key to the hearts and minds. Include us, engage us, listen to us. We are the mothers. Building communities that empower women is the key to promoting religious freedom in many of these countries. Women are the mothers, grandmothers, and they feel a certain responsibility to not allow the grievances of the past to prevent the building of a better future, of a brighter future for all of us. Whether it's Christian persecution in my birth country, Pakistan, attacks on Hindus, Sikhs, the Rohingya, Uyghur persecution, women's voices matter. They should be present. After the attack on the Christian community in Peshawar, AMWEC led the roundtable. We brought faith leaders, civil society together, some government officials. The impact was amazing. It was great. There were faith leaders from far-off places like Malakand. They were sitting there with civil society, Christians, Jews, Christians, Baha'is, and also people of other faith.
Okay.
It was a moment to be seen, to be recorded in history. Recently, women, AMWEC, took a historic delegation to Israel and the United Arab Emirates. It was very inspiring for the group to actually see Arabs and Israelis who want to hang out together, who want to have peace together. That was the most powerful moment when we were in Israel. And the Abrahamic faith stood together in front of the graves of the most revered prophets, historical figures in our faiths. We realized at that moment that
We have to wrap it
religion,
up.
these faiths are supposed to, this place is supposed to unite us, not divide us. So I say religious freedom will be a reality if we all practice it. If men and women, if we articulate it every day, and we cultivate it and we engage it, and not just through people at the top, like Ambassador Brownback said, people at the bottom. So let's be inclusive about religious freedom as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Tang with Boat USA. Boat People USA.
Distinguished guests and fellow advocates for freedom of religion or belief. I'm Dr. Nguyen Dinh Thong, CEO and President of Boat People SOS, which was established in 1980 by former refugees from Vietnam. Amid the very grim overall picture about religious freedom, or rather the lack thereof in Vietnam, we have observed that focused and sustained attention by Western diplomatic missions has had clear positive effects on persecuted religious and indigenous communities. We have noticed significant changes in the behavior of local and sometimes provincial authorities. For example, focused and sustained attention by the UK and US embassies have led to all 800 residents of a Hmong Christian community known as the Subdivision 179 in Lâm Đồng province in Vietnam's Central Highlands being processed for citizenship ID cards last year after more than 2 decades being undocumented because of their Christian faith. Unfortunately, focused and sustained attention can be offered to only few communities or groups among the many that are persecuted and deserve attention. Fortunately, there's one way around that challenge. In addition to occasional visits, which is very important and must be continued, I recommend that embassies and consulates in Vietnam to schedule periodic consultation meetings, say every 2 or 3 months, for consultation with representatives of persecuted communities, bring them to the table, not only on issues related to religious freedom, but also on anti-poverty projects, human trafficking, rule of law, women's and children's rights, preventative health, environmental justice, climate change, so on and so forth. It's very similar to this forum, but less formal, smaller in scale, and more frequent. This proactive approach would enable diplomatic missions, individually or in collaboration, to cover a large number of persecuted communities all at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anthony Vance, Director of Public Affairs with the Baha'i of the United States.
Good afternoon, everyone. Since the 1979 revolution in Iran, the Baha'is, Iran's largest non-Muslim religious minority, have been under extreme pressure. Over 200 were executed by the government over the ensuing 20 years, and a comprehensive set of cradle-to-grave restrictions based on a 1991 memorandum signed by the Supreme Leader seek to assure that their, quote, progress and development are blocked, unquote. I'd like to share 2 lessons from this. First, it is critical to consistently document as much as possible in a way that is accessible. It facilitates enormously the work of national and international bodies to quickly and confidently condemn abuses against religious freedom. In that connection, the Archives of Baha'i Persecution in Iran website is a contribution with almost 10,000 organized and cataloged entries that we invite you to examine. Second, in seeking to improve the immediate situation, we have noted that reacting to injustices in a way that respects the rule of law not only preserves the integrity of the persecuted individual, but influences societal thinking over the longer term. Specifically, in Iran, the Baha'is have chosen to appeal injustices to appropriate officials and to the judiciary, even though they know that a fair solution is unlikely to be forthcoming. However, the act of making such appeals through the authorized channels has, in our view, had an effect on the consciences of some officials. For instance, beginning in 2017, 4 provincial appellate courts reversed convictions under Article 500 of the Penal Code, which prohibits the making of propaganda against the regime. The first of these decisions explicitly held that teaching the Baha'i faith did not constitute making propaganda against the regime. 3 other provincial appellate courts followed suit in separate cases over the ensuing 2 years. These decisions would have been unthinkable only 10 years previously. Although the Iranian government amended the statute in 2021 to facilitate convictions on altered grounds, the point here was that, in part due to the observance of the rule of law by the Baha'is, a degree of respect had been established for them among a small but important segment of senior jurists in Iran, who, when they saw an opportunity to act fairly, did so. Obviously, this is far from a systemic cure for the plight of the Baha'is, but it reflects an undercurrent, a change in attitudes that in the long run will be critical if religious freedom is to be respected in Iran for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For those that have submitted to the Civil Society Congress their proposals that are not here today, we want to make sure that they are included. So we're going to read what they have presented to the Civil Society Congress. For the Buddhist Solidarity Association, we would like to ask all of you to be aware of, first, the difference between the traditional or independent religious organizations of the Vietnam and those established and sanctioned by the Socialist Republic of Vietnam after 1975, the year Communist North Vietnam took over South Vietnam. Second, the existence of the United Buddhist Church of Vietnam, which was established in Vietnam in the early 1960s, but is currently banned and persecuted by the Vietnamese government because its abbots refused to join the government-established Buddhist Church of Vietnam. We also ask that you join us in requesting the government of Vietnam to treat all religious organizations on an equal basis as required by Article 18 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. And second, advocating for the right to exist, example, legal status for Thanh Quang Temple, because the Vietnamese government constantly threatens to have it demolished unless its abbot joins the government-established Buddhist Church of Vietnam. That's presented by the Buddhist Society Solidarity Association. Thank you.
I have a brief statement from Cao Dai today. Our mission is to advocate for and educate people of minority religions to develop mutual understanding and avoid conflict. We advocate for churches and states that are separated for the purposes of sovereignty and dignity of humanity. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is our honor and privilege to join you here as the Captive Nations Coalition of the Committee on Present Danger China. Since its inception, the Captive Nations Coalition of the Committee on Present Danger China has been advocating for one thing, which is the freedom of nation under the captivity and the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party, namely Tibet, East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia, Hong Kong, and the rest of China. But over the last 2 years, we have expanded our consideration for the captive nations all over the world, namely the nations that are under the Belt and Road Initiative. We believe that this pertains greatly to the religious freedom issue around the world because of a simple reason. Because of the fact that the Chinese Communist Party tests whatever it does on the surroundings of its own territory before it does onto the world. As we have seen, the Chinese Communist Party has engaged in a number of actions that have led to degradation, a great degradation of religious freedom. More than 6,000 monasteries in Tibet have been destroyed. Mosques were turned into were used for unspeakable purposes, and multiple churches are continuing to experience a number of oppression that's too horrific to speak. And we see that the tyrannies, namely countries like Iran, Pakistan, and alike, are being emboldened, especially because of their connections with the Chinese Communist Party. We have seen a perfect example of this in Afghanistan recently, where a Chinese Communist Party-backed Taliban has been causing a complete genocide against the Shia Hazaras. We also see the implementation of the organ harvesting that we've seen through the Falun Gong communities, and now being imposed on Uyghurs and all those living in East Turkestan. And so you might be wondering what the solution to all of this is. So the Captive Nations Coalition of the Committee on Present Danger China proposed the following. Number one, to recognize and support the total religious freedom and human rights of the CCP's current captive nations, namely Tibet, East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia, Hong Kong, and China. Number two, to address the concerns of those, particularly from the BRI nations, whose religious freedom, in addition to human rights, is being further degraded partly or largely due to their government's close relations with the CCP. In conclusion, the Captive Nations Coalition of the CPDC proposes the following as well. Recognition of the CCP as the global malign entity and designation of the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. And I would like to end by showing these two photos of the recent victims of the Chinese Communist Party. One, Pastor Wang Yi of the Chinese Christian community, and Renago Heni from the Uyghur community, whose sister is also a dear friend and a sister of mine. Both of them are asking for our help, and both of them are seeking to live a day where they can also live freely like all of us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming Bob Fu, the founder and president of China Aid.
Thank you. In the past few years, under the leadership and
dictator Xi Jinping, the religious persecution in China has entered into the worst in 40 years. Besides the genocide, ethnic cleansing, like in Xinjiang and Tibet, we have seen millions of Chinese Christian children were being forced to renounce their faith in public. We have seen hundreds of thousands of churches, both the traditionally known house churches, underground churches, and even the government-sanctioned churches were shut down. The Chinese pastors were being arrested, being sentenced 5 years, 7 years, 9 years. Just recently, a pastor and his wife were sentenced to 12 years for printing Bibles. Many churches could not really worship peacefully anymore, so one of them, today I want to highlight, is known as the modern-day Mayflower Church, a congregation of 60 members with 32 children, 28 adults. 2 years ago, they voted and they escaped to Jeju Island in South Korea. So they landed there seeking religious freedom. And we all knew what had happened to them. They were even harassed by the Chinese consulate in South Korean soil. And unfortunately, the South Korean government has not refused continuously to recognize them as refugees. So I'm calling the attention of our delegations and the US government, especially when they are facing the imminent kidnapping by the Chinese government as we are talking. So the pastor was ordained as a minister by the Presbyterian Church in America in Philadelphia. So they are seeking, like our founding fathers, a pilgrim for religious freedom. And we are prepared in Texas, without any public charge, to invite them to come. So my proposal is to the US government, State Department, to help as a policy prioritize those victims of religious persecution to come as recognized as them as refugees, resettle them, and make the true successful pilgrimage as the new modern-day Mayflower Church. Thank you. Please continue to pray for them, and you're welcome to visit Jeju Island and contact with me at bobfu@chinaaid.org if you're willing. We're organizing delegation to send to help them, protect them from being kidnapped. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. We'd like to now invite up Reverend Sue Taylor with the Church of Scientology, the National Affairs Office. Reverend Sue?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I've been really inspired by the different ideas that have come up, and I'd like to add ours to that list. And it's basically increasing our reach into society through increasing our collaboration. So this is a possible new idea to assist in reversing the rise of tiding religious persecution. Collaboration has always been one of our great strengths in international religious freedom field. If our IRF Roundtable and its government partners have not been able to turn the tide, we need to increase our forces and our efforts to bring in other similar groups who are working towards a better world. We are proposing that we increase our collaboration 100-fold by tapping into already existing programs connected to our own organizations. While our IRF Roundtable here in DC and the Secretariat continue to strengthen and expand the DC Roundtable, its partnerships with governments, the number of roundtables around the world, and other government bodies working on religious freedom issues, we need to increase our reach deeper into society. One idea to do this could be through a new collaboration with our organization's already existing outreach programs, which are working on similar platforms to bring about peace, human rights, justice, rule of law, and human dignity. For example, our church, the Church of Scientology, has several civil society outreach programs established around the world, including a Youth for Human Rights education program based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in over 17 languages, and a humanitarian program to assist those devastated by disasters. I am sure other members of our roundtable have similar such outreach programs working in societies around the globe. Programs not directly related to religious freedom, but which reach deep into society, working on such issues as rule of law, justice, human rights, humanitarian programs, and medical assistance. Perhaps we can bring these types of programs into the IRF fold by keeping them informed of religious persecution. These would be flanking programs to help address issues that are outside the purview of our mission, but could assist in developing governmental and societal relationships needed by us so we can succeed. By sharing our wealth of outreach programs with each other through a newly expanded collaboration, perhaps we can increase our success to help turn the tide of religious persecution. A newly expanded collaboration working at all levels of society might work. A plan to do this could be established. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Jacob Menken, the Managing Director of the Coalition for Jewish Values.
Coalition for Jewish Values is first-time exhibitors at this event. We've not done something like that before, and I brought with us our only three individual copies, our sole copies of 3 different amicus curiae briefs. So if you're the one who stopped by our table and thought that one of them was a handout and walked off with our sole copy of an amicus curiae brief that we wanted to have here to peruse, would you please bring it back? Now, I have a short topic and then a longer issue. I think it is important that we talk about freedom of belief, that we also talk about freedom of religious practice. I think it's a mistake because Christians, being the dominant culture, obviously, you talk a lot about belief, and really there's a problem of practice that even goes beyond it. People can say, oh, we're absolutely fine with you believing what you want, but then kosher slaughter or halal are prohibited, or they interfere with education. They interfere with prayers outside a house of worship. So you have to look for opportunities to protect freedom of practice, and I think it's important that we talk about freedom of practice of religion rather than just freedom of belief. The other thing that I want to speak about is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which has already been adopted by over I believe it's just about 24 countries at this point. And it is very important that other countries adopt this definition. It has specific examples pertaining to anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, reflected in many different areas, including politics, including Israel. And this is very important for religious freedom overall, and here's why. On campuses throughout the West, idealistic young students once protested for serious civil rights abuses and protested genocide. From Biafra to Bosnia, from Rwanda to Darfur, and in the case of Darfur, Nancy Pelosi specifically commended college students for their efforts when Congress finally acted. Yet today, despite massacres of Yazidis and Christians in northern Iraq, the war on Nigeria's Christians, persecutions of Muslims in India and Christians in Pakistan, Uyghur Muslims in East Turkestan, all you hear about is Israel, Israel, and Israel. Why? Well, it assuages their guilt. It's one thing to tell, a European, they want to believe that Jews commit genocide? Great. And that those in Arab states that expelled over 750,000 Jews, that it's the Jews doing ethnic cleansing? Great. But it doesn't make it real, and it doesn't make it less despicable. The importance of the IRA definition is it allows us to force the United Nations and college campuses to stop with the pretend accusations and focus on the real cases of genocide and persecution like you're hearing about today and for the rest of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. The next organization that has submitted a paper but is not present is CTS with Chaplain Reverend Nugent. He states a U.S. non-governmental organization providing spiritual support and guidance, KODA believers, creating a forum for KODists to share their religious knowledge, facilitating online interfaith discussion with other religious groups, and tracking incidents of religion. Thank you.
I have a short statement from SIDEO. SIDEO is a global tech education company founded by refugees in Northern Virginia. With its intense 6 to 10-month program, SIDEO prepares students with no technical and educational background to get high-paying, high-demand IT jobs worldwide. Since its inception, SIDEO has empowered thousands of refugees and victims of authoritarian regimes. Its alumni are no longer the victims who need help. Instead, they're helping many humanitarian causes around the world. Thank you.
We're getting through these. Next, let me introduce to you EFOP, School for Political Training. Thank you.
Hello, I will read because my English is not so good. Greetings from Argentina. Challenges on democracy are challenges to our freedoms. Misinformation, biases, and extremism are enhanced when social and political leaders fail to give responses to society. Our individual freedoms are put into peril when in times of instability and transitions, our leaders are not prepared enough to understand the change, read the true demands of society, set objectives and plan, and create smart policies. Moreover, all over the Americas, thousands of public officials and political leaders are more concerned on the next elections than on people's needs, especially in small communities. In Latin America, 260 million people live in small and rural communities. I am part of that people. Moreover, thousands of these communities suffer from achievement and access gaps and a rising violence that puts in doubt the phrase Latin America as a zone of peace. Because of course, we don't have war between countries, but violence, drug trafficking, cartels, crime, and corruption are literally stealing the sovereignty to our states. That is why we need to train leaders of social movements, political parties, NGOs, and government teams in ethical politics, a paradigm that embraces core values around servant leadership, while practical tools such as decision-making, project management, and economic development. Information and communication technologies are a strategic asset for professional education. I am the third person in this room that talked about that. As a young man from Argentina, we work to watch cities, regions, and Latin America strengthened by the actions of citizen movements, political leaders, and public officials with values that love their countries and serve their people and communities. We need to put together voices and knowledge and design specific educational programs that build peace and democracy from the grassroots. As God said to us through King David, seek the peace and pursue it. Thank you, and God bless you.
I have a shortened statement from Empower Women Media. Millions of Muslims in restricted countries report that they have no education or media about the benefits of religious freedom. They're frustrated by political Islam and human rights abuses. So we aim to create a digital media strategy to connect with Muslims through the safety of their iPhones, computers, homes, classrooms, community centers, and workplaces. Since early 2021, we have enrolled over 3,200 participants in our Live What You Believe e-course to educate and equip participants as religious freedom advocates. Most of the participants live in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and other restricted countries. We have received over 1,700 evaluations of our course, and the large majority reported that the e-course convinced them of the benefits of religious freedom and the need to stand up for religious liberty in their Muslim countries. Many organizations already do a great job documenting and publicizing the tragic cases of religious discrimination and persecution around the world. While our course acknowledges these human rights violations, our focus is to draw attention to what is not being talked about enough, the many positive benefits of the universal right of freedom of religion, belief, or conscience. And again, that was a shortened statement. Thank you very much.
I'd like to now introduce to you Falun Dafa Information Center. Thank you.
I'd like to first thank the organizers for making this event. It's an honor to speak here. So, religious freedom goes hand in hand with information freedom. Every genocide in history began with propaganda that demonizes victim communities to undercut the general public's sympathy and justify the unwarranted brutality. This is especially so in the persecution of Falun Gong in China, where the media is monopolized by the Chinese Communist Party, otherwise known as the CCP, and the internet is extremely censored. But over the past 2 decades, Falun Gong practitioners in China have been operating on an estimated 200,000 underground print shops to produce pamphlets and DVDs to distribute in the communities, often at great personal risk. The materials expose the CCP's lies and atrocities. This kind of grassroots dissemination effort counters the state-run media and has thus far induced millions of Chinese citizens to withdraw from the CCP. Outside China, Falun Gong practitioners have been making phone calls to Chinese detention facilities to persuade police officers there to stop participating in the persecution. Some police have become reluctant to torture Falun Gong practitioners after learning the US sanction of CCP officials, though the overall persecution of Falun Gong is still very, very severe to this day. The sanctions are causing a ripple effect because they have personal consequences for these perpetrators. We need to hold these perpetrators accountable. More sanctions like these will increase this effect exponentially. It goes without saying. We recommend the US government provide more funding for software tools used to circumvent China's Great Firewall. This would significantly scale up the reach of these tools in China. A Chinese population with more access to free information is less likely to be an accomplice, less likely to be a victim of the CCP's crimes. Finally, I just want to talk about how fine arts and films are also a very innovative way to broaden the reach of religious freedom. An unprecedented movie on this topic, it's called Unsilenced. It was released in theaters this past January and is now available on streaming platforms such as Amazon, iTunes, Google Play. Unsilenced won the Audience Award at the Austin Film Festival last year. It's one of the first theatrically released movies about religious persecution in China in the 21st century. And lastly, former Secretary Mike Pompeo saw it. He tweeted about it and recommends it. So I really, really invite everyone here to go check it out if you have time. So we really hope more movies like this can be produced so we can clarify the truth on a much larger scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have a shortened statement from the Federation of Indian American Christian Organizations of North America. Nationalist governments' punitive actions against those whom they feel are challenging their agenda seem to be getting a free pass in Washington, to the extent that the State Department even agrees not to discuss India in its religious freedom conferences. As a solution, we urge the State Department to learn from the past mistakes in Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Our next speaker today is, sorry about that. Oh, my pages got messed up here. Is the Global Campaign for Religious Prisoners of Conscience. Thank you.
Good evening, distinguished organizers and participants. I represent the Global Campaign for Religious Prisoners of Conscience, which is a collaborative effort led by 21 Wilberforce and BPSOS that seeks to challenge the violations of FORB and engage the next generation of young leaders, emerging leaders, through the framework of advocating for individual religious prisoners of conscience. How are we doing this? Emerging leaders this week will be putting on a track highlighting individual RPOCs, personalize their stories, and putting a human face on the consequences of persecution and the repression of FORB. One of the key components at the heart of this campaign is empowering emerging leaders and equipping them to play a leadership role in developing and implementing innovative RPOC advocacy strategies and actions. Last fall, 21 Wilberforce brought together a global cohort of young professionals and students for an Emerging Leaders Network Summit, where they worked with experts to develop strategies and campaigns for religious prisoners of conscience. Going forward, we will place emerging leaders in key positions on the teams identifying the best RPOC advocacy strategies and practices, and help them connect with the different religious prisoners of conscience campaigns that they can join. And of course, you can find more information about that on our campaign efforts through our website. But what are we asking? So what are our main asks? We are asking that emerging leaders are given a seat at the table. So just like we are asking for religious minorities and others, we are asking that emerging leaders and young leaders are given a seat at the table. We want to hear emerging leaders, and we want them to we want you to bring them to your advocacy campaigns and make it mandatory to have young people's representation so that they can voice and express the impact that the lack of religious freedom has on their lives. We also want that you involve them through your campaigns and advocacy in getting hands-on experience and engaging in meaningful projects that can rally youths with diverse backgrounds on one campaign through one agenda and one common cause. The Global Campaign for RPOCs is an example of one such project. We also would like that emerging leaders are given the tools, the right tools, through training, mentorship, and internships, and that we bring them to our activities and our campaigns. We also ask governments to incorporate a global campaign for RPOCs and an emerging leaders component in their ministerials or other similar events. And then we also ask that NGOs similarly incorporate this component in their national or regional roundtables around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christine Sequencia, the co-chair of the Global Campaign to Eliminate Blasphemy and Apostasy Laws.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the International Religious Freedom Campaign to Eliminate Blasphemy and Apostasy Laws, I would like to thank you all for your deep commitment to the freedom of religion for all of humankind, including for persecuted religious minority groups around the world. I'm Dr. Christine Sequencia, Policy Director of the National Association of Evangelicals and co-chair for the International Religious Freedom Campaign to Eliminate Blasphemy and Apostasy Laws. Personally, it's my faith that compels me to recognize all people as made in the image of God and work fervently for their right to believe and speak in a free way that builds resilient, pluralistic communities. This was never more true to me than when I witnessed displaced Iraqi Christians serving Syrian Muslim refugees inside of a tiny church in the Middle East. In his own words, Jesus said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and to set at liberty those who are oppressed," in Luke 4:18. So specifically, our committee addresses apostasy and blasphemy. Apostasy is leaving a religion, and blasphemy is the insult of a religion, its objects, or its places. As stated by the U.S. State Department Ambassador at Large for IRF, Rashad Hussain, such laws limit individuals' rights to express and practice their faith and empower extremists to take the law into their own hands and employ violence extrajudicially. We believe it is critically important to urge Afghanistan, Iran, Malaysia, Maldives, Nigeria, Mauritania, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Yemen to repeal the death penalty for apostasy. We urge a similar repeal for blasphemy charges in Afghanistan, Iran, Mauritania, Nigeria, Pakistan, Somalia, and Saudi Arabia. As for our committee work, we endorse legislation like resolutions passed by Chairman Raskin and Senator Langford during the last Congress. We host events like one that will be happening tomorrow at 2:30 in Meeting Room 2. And finally, we are advocating for specific language to be embedded in the United Nations General Assembly by nation states this September. This is where you come in. Everyone perk up. I want to see your cell phones, so I know you have it right in your hand. Just hold it up for me. What we're going to do is sign a charter. All right, now, if you like what I've said and you agree with that, what you're going to do is text IRF to the number 855-549-0168 to sign the charter. Again, that's IRF to 855-549-0168. On behalf of the Earth Campaign to eliminate blasphemy and apostasy laws, I urge you to utilize your voice to help end brutal and inhumane acts of violence by texting IRF to 855-549-0168. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're almost done. We're getting through here. Next, I'd like to introduce to you the future Hazara leaders. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Meredith Mollahan, and in case you hadn't guessed, I'm not an Afghan Hazara. However, I am here to speak on behalf of Zainab Bakri. She is a refugee, a mother, and a student living in Germany right now. I hope next year she can join you. Afghanistan's Hazara minority should be models for nonviolence and self-empowerment. Instead, they are pariahs. For the Hazara, exile and war are nothing new. For centuries, they have faced systemic persecution and survived efforts to eradicate them through expulsion, enslavement, and mass murder. Today, the bloodletting continues. This onslaught has driven thousands into exile. Today, Hazara communities exist throughout the developed world. Nevertheless, the diaspora remains divided, uncoordinated, and ill-equipped to call attention to the plight of the Hazaras still in Afghanistan or to take action on their behalf. So far, their efforts have been disorganized and ineffective. The rising generation of Hazaras possess the skills and the education to change that. To do so, they must build a network and a platform that will connect them across the globe and facilitate organized action. First, the community must create a voluntary database of elites and educated youth. With the help of this vital network, Hazaras will discover emerging leaders. Together, they will establish a global board, define the community's goals, and decide policy in an organized, comprehensive fashion. Such a database offers significant advantages to governments and international organizations like you with plans in Afghanistan. Through it, you will easily identify and employ specialists, many of them graduates of the world's best universities, and staff your projects with men and women who are committed to their ancestral homeland. No one who hopes to bring true, sustainable change to Afghanistan can afford to ignore this long-forgotten people. Only by partnering with the nation's Hazara can they achieve lasting success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming Tim Carruthers with International Christian Concern.
Good evening. My name is Timothy Carruthers. I'm the Southeast Asia Advocacy Manager for International Christian Concern, an assistance and advocacy organization here in the DMV. While CSOs like ourselves typically look at raising awareness and making reactive recommendations, with this prompt we began to assess whether we can make effective solutions that can deter persecution for the long term. We began to look at systemic policies that would derail and prevent state-enabled practices from going forward, something that is prevalent in the region I work in. One of the key areas we identified is how can we leverage the interdependency of our nations using what financial leverage is at our disposal, specifically with assistance dollars. If you take a moment to view the US government's foreign assistance dashboard, it won't take long to find many of the countries of particular concern lined up with obligations for military, economic, or social assistance. But how as a developer nation can we continue to give so freely knowing the practices it overlooks and risk instilling practices which subjugate others as the recipient continues to develop? Our solution implores development assistant country donors to investigate the adoption of conditions in line with human rights benchmarks that must be met and upheld by development recipients. The distribution of foreign assistance must be done under such conditions which would prevent development assistance from enabling and indicating toleration for practices which abuse human rights, including the fundamental right of religious freedom. CSOs should be unanimous that our dollars must match our values. Going forward, donors must expect recipients to demonstrate good faith efforts to meet a consensus-based set of benchmarks developed by CSOs towards the defense of fundamental rights. These benchmarks should be developed by CSOs and championed and resembled but never be limited to the repeal of laws which inhibit the coexistence of interfaith groups, including things like blasphemy laws and bureaucratic protections which protect the public order over individual rights. The use of official religions and certifications which prevent minority groups from finding the right to practice on their own. Repealing things like removing the criminal court, use of criminal courts for the prosecution of nonviolent acts and disputes among religious groups. Failure to meet these benchmarks should result in a visible impact against nations proposed obligated and funds, and would prevent proposed funds from being raised to accommodate deductions on future developer budgets until these are addressed. This policy should be executed gradually, as it is in no one's interest to see these countries lose their capacity going forward to address these issues. However, the consequences should be visible. At the same time, it is an opportunity for CSOs to fulfill the gaps, to act as service providers and right the ship, and bring order and balance to the obligations and assistance distributions we've come to know, making clear our dollars cannot tolerate injustice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. He was really staying on the clock, moving it. Next, the International Committee on Nigeria.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Enada, International Committee on Nigeria. ICON provides a forum to make our demands known to foreign governments with a vested interest in Nigeria's democracy. Nigeria's insecurity must be addressed along with violations of religious freedom, freedom of expression, and human rights. We assist the IRF Roundtable in Nigeria, but also promote chat groups, practical tools, and training in how to engage foreign governments as well as their own government. ICON deploys resources to document egregious atrocity happening in Nigeria, to help inform foreign policies of foreign government on Nigeria, to be able to deploy international instruments that can help in this regard. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming Peacefully Thomas, the General Secretary of the Cthulhu Karen Baptist Churches.
I'm bringing you greetings from the internal displaced people, refugees, and migrant workers of Thai-Myanmar borders. I'm here today to share my story and the story of my people who are running at this moment as we sit in this room together. The Myanmar military, known as the Tamador, continue its brutal violence against the people of Myanmar. It has resulted in a humanitarian crisis that call for a robust international response of justice and aid. The Tatmadaw has actively targeted civilians, places of worship, school and hospital, displacing nearly 1.5 million people and deliberately blocking access to humanitarian aid. Anti-ethnic sentiments and religious nationalism continues to be weaponized to incite widespread violence against Myanmar ethnic and religious minority. We call on the international community to increase further for humanitarian aid and to work with member states, local partners, and ethnic organizations to deliver this aid both within Myanmar and to refugees in surrounding states. We especially emphasize the need for increased educational aid and opportunity to help ensure that Myanmar does not suffer a lost generations of human potentials. We call on the International Criminal Court to investigate and prosecute those responsible for crimes against humanity, including genocide committed against several ethnic groups, including Chin, Kachin, Karen, and Rohingya. Finally, we call for the formation of a truly representative government through a peace process that guarantees freedom of religious or belief for all and is fully inclusive of all ethnic and religious groups within Myanmar. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much. We'd like to now introduce Reverend Devlin with the Khartoum Earth Roundtable and East Africa Earth Secretariat. Reverend Devlin.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. Pastor Devlin. I serve as a pastor in Central Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, just in from Gaza, so I still have a lot of Gaza dust on me. I also happy to serve on the steering committee of the Washington, D.C. International Religious Freedom Roundtable, but my news today proposal is on Khartoum, Sudan. The Khartoum Earth Roundtable held the largest Earth Summit ever in Africa in October of 2020. A total of 500 participants participated in the two-day summit held at Friendship Hall in downtown Khartoum. Speakers included Her Excellency Raja Nicola, the only Christian member of the Sudanese Sovereign Transitional Council, and also His Excellency Ahmed Shahid, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Religion or Belief, also Ambassador at Large Sam Brownback, and our own Greg Mitchell, who I lovingly refer to as the chairman. A declaration for the promotion and acceptance of religious freedom in Sudan was endorsed and signed by everyone. Now, here's the latest news. As a follow-up to the 2020 Khartoum, Sudan International Religious Freedom Summit, our Khartoum Earth team, my co-chair is not here today, Tawfiq Asman Saleh, has established the East Africa Earth Secretariat. The purpose of the East African Earth Secretariat will be to bring the concept of religious freedom and religious freedom roundtables to East African nations, including but not limited to, wait for this, South Sudan, Somalia, Somaliland, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Uganda, Kenya, and of course Sudan. Our goal is to gather leaders from the above countries in December of 2022 in Khartoum, Sudan, to conduct the first East Africa International Religious Freedom Secretariat. I think that's pretty exciting. The East Africa Earth Secretariat will be the first of its kind in East Africa. As co-chairs, we are openly soliciting leaders to participate. From those countries I mentioned, we're openly soliciting financial investors in order to make this event successful and to widely promote religious freedom throughout the nations of East Africa. We are hoping that this innovative, disruptive idea for this Earth Secretariat in East Africa in inculcating the ideals of Article 18 of UNDHR will be established as a, quote, city on a hill, close quote, and bring the hope of religious freedom to many. God bless you, and thanks for all you're doing here, all of you, and keep Jesus number one.
Thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming Soraya Dean, the founder of Muslim Women Speakers.
I was born in Sri Lanka, of course, where we have an IRF youth-led roundtable now. I love my faith. I love my community. When I was 13, I went to the local mosque in my city, and I was told I couldn't come there, that I couldn't speak there, and I couldn't show my hair. And I believed them. I often wondered why my voice was suppressed while the men in my community had opportunities to have their voices expressed. I didn't know then this was received theology, and this was an abuse of Islam. Received theology is that which is handed down from generation to generation and is used with religious authority. Theological discourse on issues impacting women are largely based on patriarchy and received theologies. Most women who raise these issues are silenced, and those who speak up are discredited. Therefore, it is necessary that others of us, we women, begin to articulate these issues, because those women living around the globe do not have the privileges that we enjoy. In 1942, Albert Einstein was teaching at Oxford University. He gave a test to his senior students, and he was walking on the campus with his assistant. The assistant said to Dr. Einstein, "Dr. Einstein, you gave the exam you gave to the senior students was the same exam you gave last year." Einstein said, "Yes, the questions are the same, but the answers have to change." Today, my friends, the challenges for women of faith is that when some of our theologies are frozen in the dungeons of orthodoxy, the questions are the same and the answers are the same. President Jimmy Carter once said, "The abuse of women and girls is the most pervasive and under-addressed human rights violation on earth." So I want to talk to you about a blueprint. A building cannot be built without a blueprint. A blueprint is recommended when you build a building strong. This particular blueprint, I tell my women I train, need to have 3 components. One is, don't major in minor things. We heard this enough. We had to all become better people. Let's let go of the past to create a powerful vision for the future and take right action. During the civil rights movement, Dr. King said, "I stick with love because hate is too much of a burden to bear." So we are in a civil rights struggle, the women of faith. We must take right action and collaborative action. Look at the world not as it is, it'll break you. But let us look at the world as it could be, so that we could make it happen as it should be. And second, the blueprint should be, we need to be serious. We must remain uncompromising in our efforts to hold our institutions accountable to God's message of equality. Let us promote prophetic resistance. We must challenge religious documents codified into laws and sanctified by patriarchal structures that negatively impact women and girls everywhere. I have so much to say, but I'm going to wind up. Let us organize. This is the last one and the most important one. The women need to be organized. We need to organize and give them the support that we can. Begin a dialogue in your home, round the coffee table. Bring 10 women and tell them to organize in the community. And we must remember always the intersectionality of religion and gender equality. Above all, gender equality and human rights thrive when religious freedom thrives.
Okay, thank you. I really have to cut you off.
With support of organizations like us, it is time not for women It is not time for us to rehearse. I say it is time for us to recite. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry that we have to limit your time. Amen. This is all very important. Let me turn it over to the New York State Council of Churches. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Reverend Judith Van Kennen, and today I bring you greetings from the New York State Council of Churches. The New York State Council of Churches lives into the Christian faith by humbly collaborating with people of different faiths to counter the caste system, which is used by the Indian government to neglect its constitution and advance a Hindu nationalist state. In our quest for religious freedom and human rights, we speak out against any efforts to nationalize any religion to the detriment of people of other faiths and/or deny their full participation in a democracy. In collaboration with Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jews, the wide spectrum of Christians, people of lower castes or Dalits, indigenous peoples, and people of no faith, the Council calls on the President and members of Congress to promote policies and laws in India and the United States that do not economically exploit others to benefit the wealthy. We also speak against Indian government's continual efforts to deny U.S. citizens entry into the country of India simply because of their Christian faith. We ask our leaders to speak about the experience that many Christians have been denied entry into India simply because we have professed to be Christians. This has been affirmed by many different communions who are members of the New York State Council of Churches. We also ask our leaders to accept the recommendation of the United States Commission on International and Religious Freedom and designate India as a country of particular concern. Violating human rights and religious freedom destabilizes India and makes them a less reliable strategic partner. We urge the government of India to ease their restrictions on foreign contributions to faith-based institutions. It's really important that United States faith-based institutions can offer humanitarian and financial assistance to Indian institutions which request our help. We also ask our leaders to speak publicly with the government of India about economic exploitation and human rights and religious freedom violations. There is a place for private diplomacy, but it is never at the expense of public critique. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sharifa Shakira with the Rohingya Women Development Network.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor. Rohingya people, with the Rohingya people, an ethnic religious minority group in Arakan State, Burma, has been subjected to crimes against humanity and genocide over the course over the past 50 years. With China coming into the country with lots of economic and political interests in 1990s, it has only accelerated the process of genocide in our homeland, which has a lot of natural resources and where China sees lots of economic opportunities. Today, we Rohingya up to about 4 million worldwide included in our homeland, Arakan. Then the military-backed government led by President Thein Sein triggered massive violence against the minority Rohingya in June 2012. Burmese armed forces, along with the extremists from Rakhine Buddhist community, the dominant and coexistent community with Rohingya in Arakan State, openly burned down Rohingya villages, displacing more than 140,000 Rohingya who are still living internally displaced situations in Arakan, committed killing of thousands of them while raping, sexually abusing hundreds of our mothers, sisters, and women. These atrocity crimes have been well documented by the various human rights groups, including Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. The violence never stopped, but went on continuously phase by phase until the next round of massive violence in 2016 and 2017. As a result, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya people had to lose their lives, thousands of women raped again, and hand of Burmese armed forces and Arakan military. Almost all Rohingya existent in Burma erased and many more abuses. Today, as a result, over 1 million people are existing with their lives as refugees in Bangladesh and their lives in a limbo. In these persecutions, we all thought that the discrimination, the genocide have ended in 2016 and 2017, but believe me, it's still going on. My family, my relative, my villagers still fearing of life, fear of dying, fear of being kidnapped, fear of being arrested, and what else I can say? I was just 5 years old. Because of this genocide, because of this atrocity, I was forced to leave my country, and I have to become a refugee for 21 years in Malaysia, and I lost everything. But someone earlier today's speech said that Simba, the son of the lion, never give up, and we Rohingya people have not give up. We believe in the justice. Inshallah, one day we'll be able to return home. But while we waiting for return home with the justice, I just have a request, one thing today. As a refugee child and as a survivor of genocide, I think the education is the only way that can empower people like us, and resettlement is another option. While we wait, help us, provide us educations, help us place where we can call home and get education for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Heartfelt request. I want to present to you the Haifa Laboratory for Religious Studies. Their statement, since its establishment in 2020, the HLRS has initiated a series of activities, including a series of dialogue meetings between religious leaders on social and civic issues, the Religion and Social Change Initiative, allowing for academics to work together with religious communities in order to address social and civic challenges, an educational program on religious diversity for 5th and 6th grade students of all faiths, conferences and symposiums that explore directions for creating social solidarity among diverse religious groups, and an international conference attended by students from universities across the Middle East on the role of religious communities in promoting diplomatic ties. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming Omar Kanat with the Uyghur Human Rights Project.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Omar Kanat, Executive Director of the Uyghur Human Rights Project and Executive Committee Chairman of the World Uyghur Congress. As organizations that is working to stop Uyghur genocide, I would like to give some suggestions as to how the US government and international community can go beyond mere rhetoric to address genocidal crimes, in particular that of the Uyghurs. First, it's critical to mobilize economic leverage and to ensure that it is a multilateral while doing so. Examples include ensuring that the US Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act does not create a situation where slave labor goods made by victims of genocide end up in European and other markets, just because they are now banned for importing to the US. This is why multilateral coordination is vital. We must find ways to utilize G7, G20, and EU countries to do so. Second, we must deploy the use of secondary sanctions to ensure that global Magnitsky sanctions have a real economic impact. If there are no consequences for those who assess sanctioned perpetrators and actors such as Xinjiang Production and Construction Corporation, ex-PCC, there is little ability to make prosecution from Justice Department an effective incentive to avoid complicity. As the Justice Department cannot persecute people who are not on US soil, it is absolutely necessary to reach foreign enablers. Third, we recommend expanding the genocide prevention and response toolkit, and in particular to include concrete actions on transnational repression. This would mean taking concrete action to rescue vulnerable and at-risk refugees in danger of deportation to the country that is persecuting them. It would also include persecuting foreign agents who are intimidating and coercing victim groups in the US and Europe through retaliation against their families, who are effectively being held hostage by governments. NGOs and governments and agencies should also be providing proactive humanitarian aid to stateless victims in the third countries. We must take action to ensure that the tools for accountability and deterrence which are already have are implemented to full effect. As the Uyghurs continue to face a horrific genocide and the Chinese regime carries forward with relative impunity, it is time to ensure that this situation is a pivot point which will lead to greater justice and the prevention of similar atrocities carried out against vulnerable people worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second to our last presenters are two women who their husbands are in prison right now in China, and they're going to come and speak for a few minutes representing the wives of Chinese human rights defenders. Would you please welcome them?
As the wives of Chinese prisoner of conscience, we believe that Chinese human rights defenders are the last line of the defense for religious freedom in China. I am Sophie Luo, a Chinese Christian, wife of a human rights lawyer and activist Ding Jiaxi. The closed-door trials against my husband Ding Jiaxi and legal scholar Xu Ziyong were just held last week. After 2.5 years arbitrary detention, all the lawyers were forced to sign confidentiality agreement and not allowed to release any details of the trials. My husband was forced disappeared 2.5 years ago for attending a friend's gathering. He was sent to secret detention for 6 months, was severely tortured and mistreated, deprived of all the rights. And now he is held in a very remote detention center with conditions there very terrible, with limited food and no basic sanitation, no access to any paper, pencil, books, and newspapers.
I'm Shi Minglei, a Chinese Christian and wife of Cheng Yuan. Just as most of you, my husband is also an NGO founder, and he is one of the leading advocates for the abolishment of China's birth control policies. And he also advocated for the disadvantaged people. What he did for justice led him to be tortured, arbitrarily detained, and secretly sentenced to 5 years. And now he is detained in Hunan Chishan prison for forced labor. He needs to work 13 to 15 hours every day, and the whole year, only 4 days rest. I have a 6-year-old girl sit there. She hasn't seen her daddy for 1,073 days. Today, we are calling for your support to push the full release of Ding Jiaxi, Cheng Yuan, and others imprisoned for their good work or beliefs, to hold Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, accountable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, please join me in welcoming Patrice Peterson, the president of the First Freedom Foundation, with 2 special guests, one of which is as you'll see shortly, a very serious VIP.
She got so excited about her first time on stage, she just tuckered out. Well, we've got the True Believers here at 6 p.m., the last speaker of the event tonight, and I'm glad the CCC spies are gone, so it's just the people that we want to talk to. My name is Patrice, president of the First Freedom Foundation. This is my husband and CTO, Dean Householder.
Hello.
And our baby, Eliza. And we're here to talk about another baby that I'm excited to launch today, something that's taken us away from our snuggle time with this little one. But first, I want to have you think about, why did you come to this conference? Usually people come to events like this for one of 3 reasons. The first is to meet other people with whom you have shared interests. The second is to learn information, news, other relevant information about your work. And third is to share information. Well, today we are very excited to announce that we have developed a new app that you can use to magnify your efforts to do all 3 of those things. Today, during this conference, and also when you go home. And for those who are watching at home, you're able to participate in this conference, to join in the discussion and to participate similarly to if you were here. So it's called the Forb Forum. And if you go right now on your phones to forbforum.org, you can either download the app on the iTunes store or just download it, use it on a web browser. So why do you want to use this Forb Forum app? It is secure, it's searchable, and it's customizable. Now, when I say secure, I mean end-to-end encryption, and there's only one person who has access to all the data, and he's standing right here. So if you're using something like Signal or Slack, there are hundreds of people that could potentially be compromised, but we've used open source software and put it on our own private servers, and he's the only one that gets the information. And so it's way more secure than all these other protocols. The second reason is because it's searchable. So it becomes effectively a self-organizing directory in the movement where you can look up people and you can look up information. You can post it. You can find out, hey, some guy on the roundtable meeting mentioned something 2 weeks ago and now I need it and I can't find it because the chat's gone. You can find it on the Forb Forum if they post it to the Forb Forum. The third thing is it's customizable. Like here, you can skip out on speakers that you're not interested in. You can join and leave channels when you, according to your interests, you can create your own public and private channels. So, like every meeting or conference, it's only as good as the people who join. And so we'd like you all to please join today. Go to forbforum.org and sign up. And also think about 3 people you know who are not here today and invite them to join so that we can all collaborate more effectively together. Thank you.